Welcome. We are so glad that you joined us today as we go on the road again for Native Plants at Noon. I'm Tammy Thompson, Outreach and Conference Manager for Deep Roots, and I am delighted that you joined us here today. Anyone who's seen Native Plants at Noon before knows that this is my favorite day of the month. I'm excited that you guys decided to join us as we explore the Mingo National Wildlife Refuge. I'm not sure if any of you have ever been to the cypress swamps of Southeast Missouri in person. I have not yet, but this tour blew me away. I have seen this video 3 times and I am still excited to watch it again today and share it with you. The diversity, topography, the resilience of the swamps is just amazing. And I'd heard of Mingo so many times, but had no idea how amazing this treasured, what A.J. Hendershott calls a jewel of a conservation area is. And if you can probably tell, I'm a little jazzed. I'm having a hard time not going off script because I could just go on and on about it, but I'll proceed so that I can actually share it with you. Next month, we will take Native Plants at Noon back to the Anita B. Conservation Discovery Center with Alex and Sydney. During the program today, if you have questions, please note those in the Q&A tool on Zoom, and we will get to as many of those as we can. I'll be using the chat feature to send you the plants mentioned if we have those available and any links that are shared. And be sure to stay to the end to have a chance to win a prize. So let's get started. First of all, we would like to express a huge thank you to the Missouri Department of Conservation for their partnership on this series and everything they do to help encourage and empower people to plant more native plants and enjoy the conservation areas that they have worked so hard in Missouri to restore or maintain. And we want to thank you for your support and the feedback you give us on this series. It helps us improve and it always helps us kind of keep things fresh. And for this particular airing, I would like to do a special shout out to Jonathan Wright, president of the Wright Group, for donating his time and talent to recording and producing this amazing video. And after you see it, I think you will fully appreciate Jonathan's work on this. I also want to thank A.J. Hendershott, who you will meet soon, for his outstanding photography skills and sharing many of his photos for this broadcast. With that, I'd like to welcome A.J. Hendershott from the Missouri Department of Conservation. A.J. is an education regional supervisor within the Missouri Department of Conservation, and he has been working in, studying, and educating people about swamps for more than 26 years, and he's not slowing down. He also recreates in swamps as well, where he enjoys fishing, bow hunting, canoeing, and, as you'll see, photography. AJ has learned that the swamps do a lot for us by cleaning water, recharging aquifers, and providing habitat for countless species. And as you will find, AJ is also an amazing tour guide. So with that, we will roll tape and let AJ take it away.
Hi, I'm A.J. Hendershott. I work with the Missouri Department of Conservation in the Education Branch, and I'm here in the swamp. We're at Mingo National Wildlife Refuge, which is a jewel in the middle of southeast Missouri, and it is full of some of the most diverse and amazing plants and animals you will ever see in the state. So I invite you to come with me as we take a walk down the boardwalk and through the swamp and see who's living here, why they live here, and what makes them so amazing. I'm a big swamp enthusiast, and I've been studying and teaching in the swamp for over 26 years, and that didn't start overnight. That's something that I had to figure out. What grows here? Why is it interesting? And what is it about these plants that makes them so unique and they only live in this part of the state? And the more I learned, the more I started to appreciate, and that appreciation eventually led to excitement. I love swamps, and I want other people to see the swamp through my eyes so that they too can come down here and enjoy what they see, appreciate what's going on, and maybe, just maybe, have a similar level of excitement and appreciation for the swamp. One of the things that swamp trees have to contend with is the existence of permanent floodwater or semi-permanent floodwater. And it's not that these trees have to have the water, it's that they can tolerate that much water. Permanent or semi-permanent water will starve roots of oxygen. So a lot of your swamps, although they have trees that certainly can live there and they thrive there, they don't necessarily like permanent conditions, and if they do endure permanent water conditions, they don't tend to thrive. So when you look at some of the trees out here, the cypress trees, for example, that look really good, probably have periods of drought or dewatering that allows their roots to absorb oxygen and breathe and do its metabolic work on a regular basis. The trees that are permanently flooded, they will live there, they will tolerate it, but they don't thrive. So when you come here, have an eye for how does that tree look? Is it looking really healthy, or does it look like it's struggling? And that might give you an indication of how much water that tree has to endure. If you look down here, you can see where the moss is growing, and then all of a sudden about right here it stops. This is where the watermark is on this tree. Now this tree is very close to a slope, so it's not going to have a high watermark, but if you look at some of the trees further out into the swamp, they have a watermark that's much higher up on the buttress. So that tells you that those trees are subjected to more profound flooding. When you have a swamp like this that has water, it's important for a lot of macroinvertebrates, and it's also important for fish. 3/4 of all sport fish have some part of their life cycle in a wetland, and a swamp like this provides a fantastic place for young fish to be raised up. They're going to have lots of macroinvertebrates, things to eat, and places to hide. The cypress tree is one of the iconic species in the swamp, and anyone who spent much time looking at pictures of cypress trees is going to see one of these, the cypress knee. This is something that's unique to the cypress tree, and they typically only do these or grow these when there's a lot of water around the tree. You can plant a cypress tree on a hill or in a park or in your backyard, but it's not until they live next to water they start to form these knees. Scientists have looked at these and they have figured out they do not help the tree breathe. What they think they are doing is providing structural stability in wetland soil. So think about a cathedral over in Europe that had flying buttresses that attached to the walls to keep those high cathedral walls from buckling. That's what these knees are for. And it allows this tree in high winds and a soggy soil to keep from being blown over. They are definitely iconic. It's something that's beautiful, and it's one of the unique things about the swamp that you're going to be able to enjoy when you come down here to Mingo National Wildlife Refuge. While we're in Mingo National Wildlife Refuge a lot today, there are other places in southeast Missouri we can travel and see a swamp. For example, we could go to Duck Creek Conservation Area, Otter Slough Conservation Area, All Red Lake Natural Area, and Big Oak Tree State Park. These are fantastic places to go see a swamp, to enjoy what's living there, and they are all within a day's drive of each other. So consider that whenever you're looking at a place to go. I'm standing next to a cypress tree, and it's a cone-bearing tree much like pines and spruces, but as you can see, the cones are very rounded. When they get dry in the late fall and middle of the winter, they're going to open up their scales and release seeds. Those seeds are certainly there for reproduction for young seedlings, but they are also readily eaten by wildlife like wood ducks or deer or squirrels. The shape on these cones is unique in that they are more rounded or elliptical, whereas the other cone-bearing plants, they tend to be more elongated. Also, cypress trees, even though they are in the evergreen group, they are not evergreen. They do turn brown in the fall and lose their needles, and then they will grow them back in the spring. When I come to the swamp, I'm always looking for what's growing here and what's going on. And one of the plants that I associate with the cypress tree is a plant called swamp bidens. And it is a plant that grows in the bark crevices of a cypress tree. There's just enough organic material and water to provide habitat for the swamp bidens. And it's a pretty unique plant that you're going to see along the water's edge in these type of water trees. Over here we have one of the plants that floats on the water in the swamp, and it's pretty common and it's really unusual. Most people don't pay attention to it. Let's take a look. I think you're going to find this interesting. In this pool right here, we have some floating plants. In particular, the reddish brown plant that is floating is a small fern. It's one of Missouri's smallest ferns. It's called the water fern. It's Azolla mexicana, and it lives symbiotically with a blue-green algae, and it is allowed to affix nitrogen from the air, which benefits all the plants that live in the water there. And this particular plant is constantly on the top of the water except toward the end of the growing season, when it will drop down to the bottom. And then in the spring, it starts to actively grow again and comes back up and begins to grow once more. Some of the other plants that you can see in the swamp are pretty interesting as well. For example, there is a red buckeye that grows on some of the elevated portions of the swamp. Most people are more familiar with the Ohio buckeye here in Missouri, but in southeast Missouri, there's a red buckeye, and it gets its name because the flowers, instead of being yellow, they are a red color, and it's brilliant, and it's very attractive to hummingbirds. And just like the Ohio buckeye, it does make a buckeye fruit. It's a little bit larger and it's much lighter brown, but it is something that's very unique to southeast Missouri, and it's an important part of the ecology down here. Another plant that you can see down here in the swamp is the spider lily. It is a wonderful plant, especially when it's blooming. The foliage is green and it resembles the surprise lily that most of us have planted in our yards. However, the bloom is very different. It's white, it's very long and dainty, and it looks very delicate. It's a pleasant smelling bloom, and it will attract your attention because it is so stunning and striking. And that's something that you can find down here in some of the more elevated sections of the swamp. Here's another plant you might find in some of our swamps. It's known as the willow oak. It's in the red oak group, so its acorns are very small and they're high in tannic acid. The leaves themselves are elliptical. They don't have a lot of the typical oak shape, and they are very unique. They occur in maybe 3 or 4 counties down here in southeast Missouri, and they occur on some of the more elevated ridges of the swamp. And these trees are fast growers. They are very attractive, they have good foliage, and in a lot of places down in this region, you'll see this in people's yards. So it's a wonderful tree to have in the swamp, and it is native to this part of southeast Missouri. Marsh mallow is a plant that enjoys the sunny margins of the swamp. So you can see that on areas where the water and the land interface, and there's just enough sunshine to make them really showy. They have 2 species in southeast Missouri. One is white and the other one has a pink bloom. And they have pods that show their relationship to the okra plant and cotton. And these are fairly common, and you'll see them even along some of the waterways, ditches, and drainage areas. And it's a pretty common plant to see. It's very showy, and it makes a really nice addition to ponds. When you're thinking about swamp, you probably think about cypress trees and tupelo, but you also think about what covers the water. And that's duckweed and watermeal. It's very similar to the mosquito fern we looked at earlier. And this is something that floats on the top of the water. It does have roots, but they don't go down very far because they're not meant to touch the soil. They are just there to get whatever nutrients they need. The plants are some of the smallest flowering plants in North America, but typically they reproduce by vegetative division. So what that means is when the plant gets big enough, it starts to cleave into 2 separate plants, and you'll end up with 2 daughter plants, so to speak. These plants will float on top of the water during the growing season, and then toward the middle part of fall, they're going to drop down into the bottom, and then come spring, they will start to generate some air and be able to be more buoyant and go back up to the top of the water. I'm standing next to some corkwood shrubs here in southeast Missouri. This is a species of conservation concern that is not terribly common because it really does have to have certain habitat types that you find in the swamp. And this is a shrub that can grow anywhere from about head high or double that. And it gets its name because the wood is very punky, like a cork would be, and it floats. And so Native Americans and early settlers would use the wood for any kind of use that required the wood to float. This is another plant you're going to find on some of the elevated ridges of the swamp. This is river cane. It is the only native bamboo in North America. It is native to South Missouri, and in particular, it was very abundant in southeast Missouri at one time. There were instances of cane forming huge forests almost that were 300, 400 acres in size, and the cane would grow up to 20 feet tall. So you can imagine what a thicket this would be. And it's fantastic for wildlife. It was cover for a lot of species. It was also something they could graze on, and the cane leaves are very nutritious for wildlife. So it made a great place for nesting, cover, and for food. When you get about a third of the way down the boardwalk, you get into an area like this that's a great place to see a variety of the trees that exist down here in the swamp. For example, we have tupelo trees, swamp cottonwood, water locust, we have cottonwoods, black willows, and we also have some buttonbush out here that forms kind of the shrub layer that's in the understory. And it's a great place to view wildlife, whether it's butterflies, bees, all kinds of birds. It's a reliable place for me to find red-headed woodpeckers. And it's just amazing how much variety exists down in the swamp and how much life is dependent on this particular location. Now here's a tree that you're going to find anywhere that has a riverine system in Missouri. It's a black willow tree, but it does occur in the swamp. It occurs on swamp borders and river borders. It's pretty easy to get started with the seeds. They blow all over, they find the appropriate wet soil, and they're going to germinate and take off. One of the interesting things about the black willow tree is that it has an acid in its inner bark that is the blueprint for aspirin. So people in the past would take the inner bark and chew on that to relieve toothaches or headache. Modern science has taken that particular compound and figured out how to make it in a laboratory to make what we now see in the bottles known as aspirin. Behind me we have a water locust, which is related to the honey locust tree. One of the things that's very unique about these trees, they do have exceptional thorns on them. And these in particular on the water locust are somewhat flattened by comparison to a honey locust, where it's going to be more rounded in cross section. These trees do grow in soggy conditions, and they grow a lot of lichen on them. And you can see by looking at the leaves that it's a compound leaf, and it's very different than the surrounding foliage. Right here we have the swamp cottonwood, which is a relative of the eastern cottonwood. You'll notice by the leaf shape that down toward the end and the tip, it's very rounded. The eastern cottonwood would have a very dramatic taper and point at the very end, so that gives you a dead giveaway this is a different species. And as I've said about some of the other swamp trees, the only reason this plant is here in Missouri is because of the swamp habitat that exists in the Mississippi lowlands. And these trees right here were very important for fiber. Magazines such as National Geographic are very dependent on cottonwoods to provide the pulp that's used for their glossy pages. Over here we have one of the species you're going to encounter in the swamp. This is called a swamp privet. It's a member of the olive family, and it is a shrub that sends up a lot of stalks and shoots, and it produces flowers in early spring that are bright yellow. In middle June into July, the fruits will get ripe and drop, and then this time of year you can see these nice elliptical leaves, and that's going to be diagnostic in identifying this tree out in the swamp. Now let's take a walk down the boardwalk. I want to see some of the other species that are here, and I think you're going to enjoy this. So join me. Let's walk down the boardwalk. Over here we have one of my favorite species in the swamp. This is the water tupelo tree. It's related to the black gum, and it grows primarily in swamps of the Mississippi Delta and into the deep south. But here in southeast Missouri, this is about the only place you're going to find it in the swamps of the Mississippi lowlands. And you can see that the bark on this is mildly furrowed, it is gray, and if you can look all the way down the tree, you'll find that it has a swollen base. There are three types of trees that do that here in Missouri. It's the cypress tree, the water tupelo, and the pumpkin ash. And these three trees are adapted for living in a wet environment, and that swollen base allows the tree to have better stability in wet soil. So when a windstorm or something like that would come by, it's going to rock the tree a little bit, but not enough to topple it. The water tupelo tree are one of two things. It's either male or female, and when they bloom, the tree either has male flowers or female flowers. And the nectar and the pollen that's generated from these are interesting because that can be used to make a honey with bees that is very tasty. It's sweet, but it also doesn't granulate over time, so it doesn't drop out of suspension and get real grainy at the bottom. Also, this particular tree is very good for making wooden items such as crates. It's good for furniture, and in prehistoric times, the wood, especially areas below the water line, were used to make decoys and were used to make water floats for nets. That way you could keep your nets above as you were catching fish. The water tupelo tree has a nice elliptical leaf with some teeth on it, so it's very distinctive, and it's something that when you come to the swamp, there won't be any doubt in your mind, I'm looking at a water tupelo tree. This is a water tupelo tree that has come down, and part of the reason has to do with something that happens to the tree naturally. The wood is not rot resistant, and it does decay from the inside, and anytime a storm will come through, it makes the tupelo tree a little more prone to fall down. And you can see that this tree has been snapped on the inside. It's very hollow, and that's something that unfortunately does happen to the tree on a regular basis. But it does make for habitat opportunities for a lot of wildlife. Because the tupelo tree does hollow out, it becomes something very important for squirrels, wood ducks, and different types of mammals. Folks, I really appreciate you coming out and visiting the swamp with me. We've been able to see some of the really unique things that live down here. We have plants that live only in southeast Missouri because they have to have a certain combination of water, soil, and oxygen that only the swamp can provide. And if you get a chance to come down here to Mingo National Wildlife Refuge, you plan to spend a whole day here. There's a driving tour, there's a boardwalk, a visitor center, and you will have the opportunity to see all kinds of plants and animals that you can find only here in southeast Missouri because we have swamp. So with that, I want to encourage you to take a look at your maps, make a day trip or even an overnight stay. Check it out. I really think you're going to be excited and glad you did. Swamps are awesome. They do a lot for us in terms of recreation. They clean the water, and they provide so much habitat for so many really unique species. When you come out here to hunt or fish or bird watch, you're going to have plenty of things to do. On behalf of the Missouri Department of Conservation and the Deep Roots organization, I really want to thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. I want to make sure that if you have questions, we're going to stay on for a live question and answer session. Certainly send those to us in the chat. I also want to make sure that you have access to information to plan your own trip down here to the swamp. We will have those in links that are with this presentation. I want to thank everybody very much for their time and their attention, and thanks for listening to this episode of Deep Roots.
Well, was I right or was I right? That was an outstanding video. At this point, I would love to start taking your questions. I'd like to invite AJ and Corey to come on screen. There are subject matter experts. Corey, how do you pronounce your last name?
Kuderna.
Kuderna. I'm going to do your bio now that I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name. Corey Kuderna is the Assistant Refuge Manager for Mingo National Wildlife Refuge and has been since 2015. He has worked for national wildlife refuges across Missouri for nearly 20 years. And throughout that time, his focus has been on managing unique habitats and providing visitor opportunities. Growing up in Missouri, the outdoors has always been important to Corey for work and recreation outside of work. Corey enjoys exploring waterways, hunting, fishing, and camping. And since moving to the swamps of southeast Missouri, he has taken up mushroom hunting. So welcome, AJ and Corey, to this main stage. I know everyone is just excited to see see the video. That was outstanding. To be able to work there every day is just got to be amazing. All right. We do have some questions. We always have some great questions from our audience. And so Kathleen asks, are all of the seasons worth the trip, or is winter maybe not worth it?
How about I weigh in on that and let Corey, or Corey, you go ahead first, and if you miss
Okay.
anything, I'll say something.
I would say it's worth coming down all times of the year, particularly in the wintertime. The fall, the winter, the spring are the best times to visit. The summertime, that's the part of the year we have to go through so we can have all the great bounties that come from the swamps. But winter probably is my favorite time to go out and explore.
Yeah, there isn't really a bad time to go to the swamp as long as it's safe to travel. I love getting out in the swamp in the summer. The spring and fall are enjoyable because of the climate. But in the wintertime, snow on cypress trees is really unbeatable. So I can't tell you a time that I don't enjoy going to the swamp.
We were just talking about that too, right? I asked AJ that same question about, does the swamp freeze? And yes, it does, and provides all kinds of other opportunities for visual appeal too. I'm sure there's wildlife out there when it's frozen that's just amazing to see.
Yeah, in the wintertime, our waterfowl populations really increase. And so the swamp provides an essential spot for particularly the mallards as they're coming south. And then as birds are staging to go back north, we get really high populations in late winter, February, 1st of March. So
awesome. Every season has something to offer. That's great. Kathy asks, if one wants to visit and canoe in the swamp, are there outfitters in the area that help?
Right now, we don't have any outfitters that provide canoes or kayaks. On Mingo, though, our open period is from the 1st of March until the end of October, and the whole refuge is open at that point. So if you want to paddle, you can paddle anywhere at that time. Through the winter, we do close some of the areas to reduce waterfowl disturbance so that the habitat's available for them. But we always have some paddling available, at least on the Mingo River. But between March and October, everything's open.
I've got to say, that is one of the most enjoyable ways to encounter the swamp. The boardwalks are nice because you don't have to worry about getting on your rubber boots or your waders. But when you're in a kayak or a canoe, you get to get out there and see it firsthand. And you see some stuff that you and a handful of people are going to be able to see that particular day. It's really neat.
Is the swamp always, or is the river always high enough to canoe to navigate, or is there any parts of it that are a little lower than others?
Most of the year it's open for kayaking and canoeing. Drought conditions right now, some of the upper reaches of the Mingo River close to Monopoly Marsh would be tough to paddle.
Okay.
I guess your vegetation is your biggest challenge. Like Monopoly Marsh is the cattails and lotus take off midsummer. It's a little more physically challenging to push through those. But early spring probably is the best time. From March to May 15th is absolutely the most perfect time to visit.
Perfect. That was a great question. Can you tell us about the pumpkin ash tree? This is from Linda. And does the emerald ash borer bother it?
Yeah, okay, the pumpkin ash is native to the deep south, and it is more water tolerant than a lot of your other ash trees are. And otherwise, it's one of those that I have to pay particular attention to know this is what I have in front of me. The fact that it's growing in water helps me quite a bit, but there's some other things about looking at the leaf stalk and things of that nature. It is susceptible to the emerald ash borer, so it's something that would be of concern down the road. We need to monitor populations and see how it's being impacted.
That's a great question. It was a great question. Yeah. Wow. Laura asks, how bad do the mosquitoes get and in what season? It looks like, Corey, we're gonna flip that over to you.
All right. We can get a lot of mosquitoes down here. That's one of the challenges. Midsummer is probably the worst. If you work in swamps and wetlands, we wear long pants. We all have at least one long sleeve shirt in our truck, and a head net. So it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you get a big hatch and you cover up. So I don't personally use a lot of bug spray off because it doesn't work when things get really bad, but that's only a few days a year. So generally the summer's the more intense time, but it's doable. It's worth the trip.
For
I have
sure.
found that mosquitoes have a time also. They really don't like to be out in the sunshine. So early morning and late afternoon is a key time to be prepared for mosquitoes. And if you're going to be out in the full sun for any reason, for example, if I were kayaking out on the Monopoly Marsh, I wouldn't worry about mosquitoes most of the day long. But if I'm going to
Really?
be in the deep swamp where it's shaded or there's not a lot of wind, well, that's a place where I need to be prepared for mosquitoes.
All right, that's great advice. And Val asks, compared to elsewhere in Missouri, are there more mosquitoes? We are mosquito aware.
Yeah, there's lots of things I worry about when I'm in the swamp, and mosquitoes are probably one of the more frustrating parts of it. But as Corey mentioned, if you bring the right clothing, you bring some repellent when you need it, you're probably going to enjoy your experience. Just don't go unprepared. That's where you're going to have misery and not enjoy yourself.
Very fair. And that's usually when I get myself, I found myself in yards getting chewed up as often as I've found myself. I'm usually more prepared when I'm planning to be in the wilderness. Barbara asks a great question. What month are marshmallows in bloom?
July, definitely. I'm trying to think if I've seen them in June, but July, August is when I've seen them. Corey, do you have a different take on that?
That's when we usually see most of them on our levee sides and that. Yeah, before it gets that real hot part of August, they usually bloom before that.
How long do they bloom? Are they a short season or a longer season? Weeks or?
I would say a week or two in most
Okay.
cases.
Okay. So Barbara asks, what is it about cottonmouth snakes that lets them swim on the surface of the water?
Well, a lot of your snakes can swim, but they are a little more buoyant. I think it's because their lung is, they do have one lung, not two, and it's probably a little more profound than some of the other water snakes would be, but they're also a thicker bodied snake, and that allows them to just stay more buoyant up on top of the water.
Interesting. And then on the heels of that, right in line, we'll segue to a question Robin has. What sort of amphibians and reptiles can we expect?
Oodles and gobs.
Yay.
That's a tough question down here. Almost everything is in Mingo. We've had University, Missouri State's been over, Missouri Western State University's been down, Southeast Missouri State have all come this fall. So as far as reptiles and amphibians, this I think is probably one of your best spots and has a long list of stuff we've got here.
Crocodiles, alligators?
No alligators
Okay.
yet.
Just making sure.
Yeah, I understand they've moved up just north of Memphis area. So
Wow, that's
maybe before I'm too old.
Wow, that's further north than I would have expected.
On the topic of reptiles and amphibians, some of the best diversity in the state is centered right on top of Mingo, and it has to do with the intersection of the Ozarks, Crowley's Ridge, and all of that swamp habitat. So one of my favorites is the three-toed Amphiuma, which is a salamander that can grow up to 3 feet long. It's blind, it hunts with electrosensors, and it has recurved teeth. And it is actually preyed upon by the mud snake, which is a black and red snake that's very secretive. And when they get to the right size, the amphiumas are really a pretty big contender to take over and kill the mud snake if they don't judge size properly. And that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see only in southeast Missouri in terms of a swamp critter. So a lot of neat stuff down here. If you get your reptile and amphibian book out, you're going to see a lot of neat stuff that grows right down here in southeast Missouri.
That's outstanding. We'll have to send the name of that to our viewers because that's, Kathy asks, isn't there some strange amphibian that is pretty rare there? Is that the one?
That would be one of them, yes.
Okay. Okay. We'll make sure that we provide any rare species to our listeners. Mary asks, and this is a great question. We struggle with this up here in the Metro KC area. Are there invasive plants in the refuge? And my follow-up is, how do you manage that with all the water?
Well, yeah, we've definitely got our share of invasives. We use some herbicides in cases. The swamp, we can dewater areas. Mingo is actually a drainage district that failed. And because of that, we've got some infrastructure that we're able to move water in and out and then also block it to reflood it. So we do have more control than you would have in a totally wild swamp. So in areas we can dewater and let things die out, and then more preferable plants come back. And then we use mechanical controls, mowing and disking. We do that mostly in our moist soil units. If we get into the continuously flooded stuff, there's not a whole lot. A good flood is about the only thing that takes out a lot of those invasives. So, but yeah, we've Johnson grass is a big problem here. Serratia lescabisa, that's a big problem. And then we've also got vertebrate invasives. We've got the feral swine and that we have to work on, and nutria. So we find one or two nutria a year, and so they haven't taken over yet, but it's something that we really have to monitor for.
Interesting. And they like that wet habitat.
Yeah, it's a lot like a beaver or a muskrat. So it's an oversized muskrat.
Dealing with that up here. Our Val asks, and it's a great question, are there particular bats using swamp habitat?
Yeah. The Indiana bat. We have during the winter or summertime. This is a lot of Indiana bats. We've got the little browns, and then the tricolor. That's something that we're looking at right now. Is there a candidate species? So a lot of bat usage. We really try not to do any timber cutting through the summer because of possible bat use, and particularly dead and dying or trees that have bark that's starting to slough off. That's the best habitat for them. So we do get a lot of bat use here, and then also another refuge we manage, Pilot Knob, that's actually got a Indiana bat hibernacula. So we work on both seasons, summer and winter, for bats.
Outstanding. Richard asks, is there a subtle current in the swamp or is it stagnant?
It's a subtle current. On occasion, you'll have a little bit of flow, and certainly water does move, but it's very slow. So anyone who would be interested in kayaking or canoeing, it's not going to be like being in the Ozarks, where you're going to have to contend with steady current and river hazards and so forth. Yeah. This is a much different experience. It's much like being on a very, either a lake or a skinny lake, depending on what part of the swamp you're in.
Outstanding. And Barbara asks, this is, by the way, it's a very vibrant Q&A. This is people are excited about this location, as am I. Barbara asks, can anyone schedule an MDC guided tour of the Mingo River or any other area?
Well, I should probably clarify, I work with Mingo as a partner from time to time, and several of us do. The Department of Conservation and Mingo work closely together. We manage properties that are together. We have certain educational goals that are very similar and compatible. And while we work on Mingo some, the refuge has their own staff, and that's what Corey does there. And they have their own educational offerings. And I should probably let Corey speak for the refuge when it comes to that.
That's great.
Okay. Yeah. We have offered paddling trips up the Mingo River in the past. We don't currently have any right now. We're without a park ranger, so we're not offering as many trips as normal. But call and ask. I mean, that's all we can. If you've got a group that wants to go, it's easier for us to work with a group that is organized than to put out a news release and wait for the first 30 people to call. So yeah, if you've got an organized group, give us a call and we'll accommodate as many of those as we can. But at this point, we're not doing any just general public tours. So
And we understand the restriction there. What we will do for our listeners is we'll make sure that your links are on our resources so that they know exactly how to get information and how to request that kind of thing when they're ready. And Wei Wu asks, is the Mingo area open for hunting? And what's the season? Should visitors avoid that time period? So basically, is there a hunting season? I believe there is. And is it such a season that visitors would avoid it? Other visitors?
okay. I had to turn my lights back on there. We have motion sensors. So yes, we do. We do have hunting on the refuge. There wouldn't be any problem with visitors coming during hunts. We have, I guess, our first season would be turkey hunting, and then that's followed up by the summer squirrel season, and then archery deer, and then we do 2 managed deer hunts, and one of those is a youth hunt, and then we also do a muzzleloader hunt. And during those 2 hunts, it's the first weekend in November and the first weekend in December. We close a portion of the refuge so that we don't have any cross between the hunters using firearms and visitors, because there's just a little bit more hazard there. Our bow hunters, you have a short range. I mean, if you were out and somebody was in a tree with a bow, don't walk right under them. But there's really no safety issues there. So yeah, come down anytime. Just probably avoid that first weekend in November and first weekend in December, and you'll have access to more of the refuge.
Outstanding. We have a few more questions in the queue, but I'm going to take one more. And if you guys would be so kind to, if I send these to you afterward, just a few more, if you guys would send me those answers, we'll make sure our listeners can get them later on. Jade, this is the last one. I think it'll be a quick one. Jada asks, any established eagle nests at Mingo?
Yeah, we've definitely got eagle nests here on the refuge. We've got one in Company Farms that's visible from the road, and that's open all year round, so people can see that. They were actually carrying sticks. Our biologist saw that on Monday's waterfowl survey. So looks like we've got a pair that's preparing, and then we've got some up on Ditch 3, and that group, actually 2 nests up there. They're just back in the forest just a little bit, so they're a little tricky to see, but there's a lot of opportunities. And actually, we're going to actually hold the Eagle Days down here in February. So we've had a few that we've had to cancel, but things are looking good, and I think we're going to be able to open up the refuge to an Eagle Days through a partnership come February 3rd and 4th.
Those are so exciting. And we have those up here in December. So it'd be kind of nice to enjoy them all throughout the winter.
Come on down to the tropics of Missouri.
That's right, the tropics of Missouri. Well, I'm gonna end the Q&A for now. AJ and Corey, we were so thrilled to have you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for thoughtfully answering our listeners' questions, our viewers' questions. This has been amazing. And I'll tell you, as lively as the Q&A is, you can expect some more visitors down there to the swamp, myself included.
Well, great.
So, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we could close out. We do give a prize at the end of every, let's try to see this, at the end of every broadcast. So first of all, I want to do a big thank you to you two and your amazing videographer, Jonathan Wright. There is so much preparation and work that goes into these recordings, and we are grateful for the careful attention to detail Jonathan gave, all of the back and forth, all of the expert. I know he gives all of that information to the experts, and they view it and make sure that that everything he puts on video is correct. So shout out again to him. Thank you to you guys for your time, your expertise, and your enthusiasm. We just are so grateful for that. For all of you viewers, if you have a chance to see this treasure of a site in Southeast Missouri, I recommend going. I am already looking at weekends, maybe even those Eagle days. February is kind of a slow time for us. Now it's time to give away a prize to an astute viewer. The winner of the prize will receive a set of native plant note cards, each featuring a unique native plant drawing by local Kansas City artist Nancy Waugh. For those of you not able to win today, they are available for purchase on our website. So the quiz question is, before I close out, it's true or false? The cypress knee on the cypress tree that AJ showed exists to help the tree breathe. Is that true or false? Put that in the chat. So, and we'll come back to the winner in just a minute. Want to tell you about a few things going on. Upcoming events on November 3rd, we have our next Lunch and Learn. That's November 3rd. It's Deep Roots series. It's kind of a beginner and refresher series called Digging Up the Dirt on Healthy Soils. So we're really excited. That's part 2 in our beginner/refresher series. So we'd love to see you all join us then. Thank you for tuning in today for Native Plants at Noon. If you've missed any of our episodes, you can find them all at deeproots.org. We record every single one. And while you're on our site, we would be grateful if you would consider making a donation to Deep Roots as well. So the winner is, all right, the winner of this is Laura Morton. Laura, congratulations. The answer was false. The cypress knees, scientists believe it is, they are there to stabilize the tree. So congratulations, Laura. Laura, I know you have my email address, so email me the physical address where you'd like us to send those cards. Congratulations to Laura. And it was also a very active chat there too. So have a wonderful day, AJ and Corey. Thank you so much. We are so thankful for you guys and to our viewers as well. So signing off and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.